Welcome along. This is Westerley VR race number 2.10. That's the 10th race in Series 2. We're going through the winter of 2021. That's 2020 and 2021. This was filmed back in November, just at the beginning of the series. Race to take place in March. So as we gently drop down from the A413, we're going through Chalfont St Giles. St Giles apparently is the patron saint of lepers. We can see the church just on our left there, but I'm not sure if the church is called St Giles, but the village is. It's Chalfont St Giles, one of many Chalfont villages. As you can see, one of those sort of oldie-worldy English-British villages. You expect sort of Corporal Jones and Captain Mannering to be popping out the bank and the butchers, respectively. Caught in time, a nice little place in itself. And historic connections for this one as we just come up the hill. Just on the left as we go up here, we're going to pass the cottage of John Milton. Now, if you don't know who John Milton is, that's his cottage just up in the little clip, and we're going past it right now, the photograph taken from the other angle. Now, John Milton is, to people who love poetry, a very important poet from many centuries ago. Unfortunately, I'm not an aficionado of poetry, or at least if I am, it's a little bit more in the Smokey Robinson or Grandmaster Flash sort of mould. But John Milton is apparently a great English poet. He's, I think, noted in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey, and he is revered. His famous poem was Paradise Lost. I gather there's a poem called Paradise Gained as well, which probably sums up the year 2020 when we lost the paradise of riding out on these roads in groups and so on and so forth. But we regained paradise thanks to platforms like RGT, so you can go and ride these places virtually. And these videos give you a little insight into what the races are like. Now, you would have noticed from before passing Milton's cottage as we came out of the village, we're going up the hill. Now, this is really the climb that's going to sort the race out, I think. So essentially, at the start, we drop down from the A413 into the village, and from there on, you get this climb, and you can see the white building ahead. Just past there is the top of the climb. But this is going to sort everybody out, I think, from the beginning, and you can probably find little groups reforming as we hit the top of the climb, which we're nearly at. Perhaps it's the next white building rather than the one I identified, but we're nearly there anyway. So essentially, just have your climbing shoes on for the beginning of the race, and that will see you well, because after that it isn't as difficult anywhere. I mean, this is, as I say, it's never a difficult climb in one of our Westerley VR races. We always kind of pick hills that are manageable and keep the racing flowing, and make sure that the gradients don't have too many nasty ramps with a bit of smoothing. So this is it. We're at the top of the climb. We turn left now. We're going towards Chalfont St Peter. There are several Chalfonts, and I'd say this road is fairly flat. Nothing too important to report along here, and you'll get your respite. But we might already have the field splintered into little groups. I would certainly think so, or reasonably, probably moderately large groups actually, because everybody would have started together. And some people will drop back out of one group and into the one behind, forming reasonably large groups, I suspect, along here. So fairly flat, nothing too much to concern yourself with, other than just pay attention. We all know with RGT that if you get a bit distracted and don't pay attention and you fall off the back, it's very hard to get back onto a group. Now, that said, we think they've improved it. The recent dynamics improvement seems to us in the races that we've been involved in since then that the dynamics work a little bit better, in the sense that groups aren't bouncing around as much. We seem to think that as you catch a group, you don't go tearing past the people in the front and therefore speeding up the group and making it harder for everybody else at the back. It does seem to sort of act a little bit more naturally now. So if you can see a little group 10, 20 metres ahead of you, you may be able to catch them along here. If not, you probably might be best conserving your energy and getting into another group behind you, because collectively you have more chance of catching the group in front, in theory. So, as you can see, we haven't shifted the gradient much at all along here as we get ever closer to Chalfont St Peter. Chalfont St Peter doesn't seem to me to be quite as quaint as Chalfont St Giles, which I think must have been probably the older of the villages. Although, as you go along this road, you do pass a little sign saying that Chalfont St Peter was in the Domesday Book. Now, if you're not from England or Britain, I'm not sure if I assume the Domesday Book doesn't really count in certainly in Scotland. Whether it probably doesn't in Wales either. But after the Normans invaded the UK back in 1066, a date etched in every Englishman's mind, the last time that Britain was successfully invaded. I say that during the Napoleonic Wars, there was lots of French raids, which might be arguably successful, but territorially retaining the kingdom, that was the last time that Britain was successfully invaded. And afterwards, the Norman kings, starting with William, they wanted to sort of, put together a log of what they'd sort of conquered and what was in the land, and they created this book called the Domesday Book, where they went around and recorded all the villages, how many inhabitants, and what the terrain was like and things like that. And the Domesday Book still exists somewhere in some British museum somewhere. Probably is the British Museum. So the Domesday Book, if your village is mentioned in the Domesday Book, the village has been there since 1100. So whilst Chalfont St Peter never seems to look that old to me, I believe it is in the Domesday Book and is thus, the thick end of sort of 900 years, I suppose, old at least, probably more, over 1,000 years old, a millennium. Right, so as we see the little horse and cart going the other way, gently enjoying the top of the road, and I think the sign there is the one that says it's in the Domesday Book, but it's certainly welcoming us to Chalfont St Peter. Again, from a race perspective, this section absolutely flat. There's nothing that's going to let you down other than your own ability, attention, and mechanical failures. And in fact, one of the recent races, one of our friends using a power meter with a conventional turbo at the back got a puncture during one of these races, and of course, with no air in the tyre, it didn't connect to the turbo, and everything sort of started going a bit wrong because the power wasn't coming out of the power meter and so on and so forth. So we turned the bend at the top of Welders Lane. Welders Lane was the road to the right there, and one that all local cyclists around here will know. It's a bit of a climb up to here, and historically had a very rough surface. You could easily lose a water bottle going down it with all the rough surface, but it's not quite as bad these days. Has flooded a bit recently though. One incident, two of us were riding down there, and the floods were so deep after a week's rain that we couldn't actually cycle through, but luckily this guy with a big van came along and said, put your bikes in the back of the van, and carried us through the flood in his van. I don't know if that counts on club riders having done the club ride properly, but good job it wasn't a race. I'm sure that's a disqualifiable offence. So here we are in Chalfont St Peter. We're right at the top of it, where the white van's coming out there. If you drop down that hill, then you come out right in the high street of Chalfont St Peter, but we're going up the top to what is Gold Hill, if you know the area, and on towards Gerard's Cross, which is a nice little well-to-do commuter town in Buckinghamshire. The railway there takes you into Marylebone Station, and they recently, or I say recently, within the last few years, they built a supermarket, Tesco's I think it was, across the top of the railway where the station was, so that when you go to the station, you go through the grocery store, supermarket, whatever you want to call it. But while they were building it, unfortunately, somebody got their calculations wrong and the whole thing sort of collapsed and the railway was shut for a while. But they did manage to fix it, and they now have a gleaming supermarket as a railway station, which is an interesting combination. You can't really, you can't really give any excuse if you get home having forgot to buy the groceries that your wife or spouse, husband asked you to buy on the way home from work, can you? So we're heading towards what I'd call Gerard's Cross now, out of Gold Hill and Chalfont St Peter. Again, still flat. We're still at the top of this crest. Basically, I suppose to the right, after a couple of miles, you start dropping down into the River Thames Valley, and if you go left, you're really in the River Chess Valley. So we're going along what is essentially a ridge between two river valleys. Anyway, the right-hand turn here, taking us up towards Gerard's Cross Central. Nice sunny day for November, and actually, I think by the time you ride this, we'll be back into summer. So there's quite a lot of leaves on the trees, although some of them are beginning to brown, so you can tell it's autumn in the photos, or fall for the American viewers. So again, as we sort of sit on top of this crest, not really doing anything, we are enjoying some flat road, and as I say, it's really about you sort of having the stamina to stay with the pack, position yourself carefully, and just make sure you don't get dropped. Stay with your group. Well, essentially, as I say, we are heading towards the Thames Valley. This Dead Poets Society, it starts at Chalfont St Giles, where John Milton lived, and it finishes at Stoke Poaches at the grave of another famous poet, I'm told, Thomas Gray, famous for Gray's Elegy, I think, was his famous poem. Again, from a long time back, I'm not a poetry aficionado, so I can't say a lot about it, but he was buried in Stoke Poaches churchyard, and in fact the race is going to stop right by his grave. Now, the Stoke Poaches is not far down the Thames Valley, but we will effectively be dropping down into Stoke Poaches, which is just north of Slough, and essentially it's the top end of the Thames Valley. So there's no, it's not as if we're going to go all the way down the valley in the second half of the race or anything like that, but we are overall on a downward trajectory. Once we sort of get out of, essentially once we get out of Gerard's Cross, there is a dip because there's a river Alderbourne, I think, which so we will entail one little dip before we get to Stoke Poaches, which is a river valley I'd forgotten about, but it's a small one. So anyway, when we get there, we'll highlight it for you. This is, as you can probably tell by this sort of slightly enhanced speed, there is a slight little dip here, but this is not anything that is going to sort of really show up on the profile. So I wouldn't read this in as a tactical place to attack. As I say, this race has essentially that big hill at the beginning, which is the key, I think, to making sure that you're in the group you want to be in. And if you feel that you're not front group material, then you won't be too bothered if you're not in the front group at the top of that hill, but make sure you're in a decent group. And the other thing is, if you can sort of get halfway up with the front group and you get caught by the second group, it ensures you get into the second group by virtue of being part of that. Rather than sit in the back of the second group and find you get dropped, best to be dropped by the first group and swept up by the second. Then you can do all this easy bit on the flat at the top, with nicely tucked into the second group. If that's your level, if you want to be in the front group, you better make sure you get up that hill with the front group so that you can enjoy this part of the race. Now we're going into Gerard's Cross. Now this has got a sort of slight oddity because I have to go through a little footpath to get to the next section. Of course, it won't be this narrow on RGT. It will all look like it's lots of wide roads with trees and all the rest of it. But a little cut through here to save us going through the town. And we come out by this nice little pond here, which, if you didn't know about this cut through and you live locally, is quite a nice scenic way. And it avoids all the traffic lights in the centre of Gerard's Cross. This is just up near the main A40, the London-Oxford Road. Which itself is not that busy these days because there's a motorway being built to replace it, as I say. So this is just to our right, probably sort of 500 metres to our right, across that little bit of green grass there is the A40, and we're going to actually just ride parallel with it and get back on and cross it a bit further out right on the outskirts of Gerard's Cross towards Denham. So, say this is a little back street cut through that we certainly use. I've certainly used for club rides, and I have to say, one or two club riders have missed that alleyway when they've got left behind and found themselves in Gerard's Cross town centre. But there we are. Stick with the pack, and you'll be fine. You won't have these problems in RGT because you don't get the option of the turn-offs. So here we are, going past one of those sort of, it's not a village green. I think Gerard's Cross is bigger than a village, but, one of those little sort of greens that, if it wasn't November, might have had some cricket players or something on. So this is the road that we're going to cross now. This is the road out of Gerard's Cross High Street, or whatever it's called, up to the A40. So the traffic lights at the end of that road, just a bit further up, are the A40, the main Oxford London road, but we're going left, running parallel, again with one of those sort of, looks like a cricket green. I suspect they can't all be cricket greens, because despite the media assuming that cricket is a national game, the amount of people that really like it is not as big as you might believe. I can't imagine Gerard's Cross having 6 cricket teams anyway. So here we are. We're just going to sort of swing round to the right here, and that will take us up to the main A40, which we're not going to particularly ride along because I'm actually looking to cross it here and get down to Fulmer. And then that Auburn Valley being the other valley that I had kind of overlooked, which just sort of tucks in between the Chess Valley and the Thames Valley. So we basically went up from the Chess Valley. We're going to just cross the Auburn Valley, and then we'll start going down the Thames Valley, but not very far because Stoke Poaches is at the higher end of it. So here we are, just final throws of Gerard's Cross before we hit the main A40 road. Not a lot to say. As you can see, it's been flat all the way. It's quite a nice leafy sort of suburban area to live in. I mean, Gerard's Cross is a nice town by any standards, and it's certainly an attractive place to live if you have any lottery winnings or have done well in life one way or another. And inheritances, that's the other way you might get in there. So this is it. You see there's a lot of green space there. We're still riding past sort of what might be, I suspect, common land. I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot of that at this sort of southern end of Gerard's Cross. So here we are. This is the main A40, at least the old road, because it's been replaced by the M40, which we will see shortly. And we're just going to cross it here because we're just going to go along it for sort of maybe 40, 50 metres, and then turn immediately right here on the road down to Fulmer. So we've enjoyed the flat now for quite a while. As I say, we are going to get this little dip where we do the Auburn Valley, but it's certainly, I suppose, the next place to attack. If you are in a group where you think you need to shed some riders, certainly depends on what you see as your skill set. I mean, if you're a good sprinter, you might as well just tuck in the group and hope you can out-sprint everybody. If you're not the greatest sprinter, you might want to look at this as a time to sort of get yourself out of a pack or shed a few riders to make your own potential position a little bit better. We're just sort of heading towards the beginning of this little dip, as I say. It's probably a very, very sort of slight descent along here, I would imagine, but probably less than 1%, so it doesn't... it's a kind of false flat, I would guess. But you'll spot when we start dipping, because that's... so it's a decent descent into Fulmer. Anyway. So, not a lot I can say. As you can see, it's one of these moneyed areas. Quite nice houses, desirable residences, etc., etc., etc. South Bucks, as ever, being one of those places that houses a lot of the nation's more wealthy residents, I would suggest. I think that's probably why they took Slough out of South Buckinghamshire, because it spoilt the image. Slough's now in Berkshire. Since 1972, I discovered the other day, which I probably should have known, but knowing the area. But there we are. Now, as I say, we are now well and truly out of Gerard's Cross. So it's heading towards Fulmer area. So well, actually, not so much Fulmer. I think I think Fulmer is the next road down. Actually, this one's probably this one's probably more heading towards Farnham Common. I think actually this road. So scrub all references to Farnham to Fulmer and just replace them by Farnham, and you might so I'm not going to go back and re-edit the commentary just for that. I can tell you. Anyway, you can see. I mean, if you look at the horizon, sort of certainly to the right through the trees, you can see the hills. The peak of the other side of the trough we're about to go down, and you can see that it's definitely dipping now. So and here we go. Right, so this bridge will be over the M25. Actually, I think this is the Fulmer Road, actually, not the Farnham one. Jockeying for position. So you can see we're descending now. I mean, it's not particularly steep. Yeah, this is Fulmer, sorry. I was right the first time. It's not particularly steep, but, it's long enough to build up some decent momentum. And here we are. This is Fulmer Village. This is definitely Fulmer and certainly not Farnham. So yeah, this is Auburn Valley. We're probably pretty much at the bottom as we go around this little sort of series of bends into the village and twist through past the little village houses and the church, etc. There's a sharp right just coming up at the end of this wall next to the village hall. You can see the church opposite the village hall. We swing round left, go past a pub called the Black Horse, and then we start climbing. This is one of our regular club ride climbs. I don't know what the road's called, but it's the climb out of Fulmer. Interestingly, it's not too difficult, but this is certainly an attack point as we come out of Fulmer. The climb itself is quite gentle, and I do smooth them a little bit so you don't get the effect of little ramps that will just mess up your flow. It gets a little bit steeper towards the top rather than down here in these lower fetches. I mean, certainly as we turn right here, we often come out of this road in the opposite direction and carry on at the top bit and the steeper bits at the top. So we've missed out the steeper bit, and you're not really going to struggle too much on this. But I think at full gas, it's probably enough to start dropping some other riders. And, at the stage we are in the race, because we're now heading towards Stoke Poaches, we're going to loop around a little bit in the lanes just to keep the distance up. But, this is certainly a place where you might want to consider an attack. As I say, if you look at the profile, I mean, if you go on to our Ride with GPS profile, which we always provide through Facebook to RGT users and RGT events, you will see this climb. And as I say, I think that's probably a good place to attack, because we're now at the top of that Auburn Valley again, level with where we were before. Nothing particularly from here is going to hurt too much. And, if you have shed half a dozen people off your group, that's surely got to be better for you and better for your finishing position in this race. Westerly CC 2.1 Dead Poet Society. Remember, it starts at one poet's cottage and ends at another poet's tomb, as we shall see shortly. I would love to impart lots and lots of knowledge about these poets, but I really don't know much about them, I'm afraid. I will say I've heard of them forever because they were mentioned at school, but I can't honestly say that I've ever sat down and tried to fully enjoy any of their poems. Paradise Lost, John Milton, Elegy, Thomas Gray, I believe the two greatest hits, shall we say. The fact that two poets, I presume they weren't alive at the same time. I don't know if this was a sort of cluster of poetry in South Buckinghamshire, but anyway, never mind. I'm sure there's plenty of you listening who are much better educated than me that can tell me all about it. As I say, Paradise Lost or Paradise Regained, the Milton poems that I have heard the names of, and I think RGT has certainly regained paradise for us during COVID, a paradise we lost because of COVID. So I are very apt. I bet the words have got nothing that fits that analogy at all. I'll have to go and look at them after the commentary now. As you can see, still flat. It's leafy, South Buckinghamshire. I don't know what the trees are, but historically, all the wooded areas around here were famous for beech many years ago. It's why the furniture industry started up in places like High Wycombe, because of all the beech forests in South Buckinghamshire. Burnham Beach is protected, and still, in fact, it's probably about 2 miles, 3 kilometres ahead of us. If we went down in a straight line, you'll get to Burnham Beaches, which is actually part of London and is preserved as a nature reserve. We're not going to quite get there because although we're heading towards it on this road, we're going to swing a left very, very soon and head towards Stoke Poaches instead. I don't know quite why Stoke Poaches has got such an old church and how old it is. I don't really get the impression when I ride through Stoke Poaches that it's got great history, but its church must have been there a long time. Certainly if Thomas Gray's buried in it. And the only person that I can remember, any famous person I can remember from Stoke Poaches, certainly the football commentator David Coleman used to live there, I remember. But Stoke Poaches Golf Club has been seen by millions around the world because it's the golf club that features in the James Bond film Goldfinger, and it's quite an exclusive golf club. I think Brad Pitt's actually a member as well. Yes, if you can get a membership to Stoke Poaches Golf Club, you are somebody special. Actually, I did have a business meeting with the owner down there once, but he didn't offer me a membership, and I didn't ask because I don't play golf. Too busy cycling. So we're getting to the final throes of this now. Swing away there from the road that sort of essentially goes to the Farnhams that I mentioned earlier, incorrectly earlier, but correctly this time. And now we're heading down towards Stoke Poaches. So as I say, there's kind of some little loops just to build up the distance. It's all reasonably flat and moderately downhill in places, but in a kind of false flat sort of way. So if we recap the tactics for this race, there's that first, the large climb out of Chalfont St Giles almost from the start. You've got a little dip just before you go up. And the second one is Auburn Valley, which is the one we just went through at Fulmer, of which is not such a great climb, but with, a few kilometres in the legs, might be the place just to shed your rivals. Or if you're hanging on, it might be that time that just grimace and get through it, because if you can get through it, this last bit's not going to trouble you too much. So heading through lanes again, this is heading towards Slough. For all Slough's industrial heritage, the surrounding areas are very nice indeed, as you can probably tell from the passing scenery. And certainly there's a lot of old villages in the area that have, they perhaps, centres of some of them have retained their charm, but London's overspill has meant that most of them have got developed a little bit, but it's kind of got some quaint legacy with some of the benefits of mass population. Just silly things, more shops and more facilities, because the population's larger than it would have been elsewhere. Quite a desirable area. And as I say, South Bucks it doesn't always get flagged up in the way that sort of certain places like Surrey and Cheshire do, well, not all of Cheshire, but the bit just south of Manchester. Sandbanks in Bournemouth, places like that are often renowned for it. But believe you me, South Bucks overall has got more than its fair share of wealthy residents. And I hope they, I quite like the way it's kept anyway. I mean, for cycling, it's fantastic. I don't live in it, but, it's very accessible for me from West London. And, it leads up to the Chiltern Hills a bit further out in Buckinghamshire towards Aylesbury, which are good for climbing. So we're quite, I'm quite happy to have it the way it is. As I say, this is just, extra little kind of loops to get us round to Stoke Poaches in the right distance. We will end up right by the churchyard, and I think there's a little photo coming up showing you Gray's tomb when we get there. We're not there yet. I'd say tactically there's nothing that special now. It is this just sort of hang in there to the sprint and get your sprint right and watch everybody else. Some of the recent races have been quite interesting. Some people have got away. I mean, Jan Dekker got away well in the last one. I mean, Jan Dekker is a bit of a superstar on RGT, of course, but timing of these sprints is not always to your choosing, and if you don't go with somebody and nobody chases them down, there's always a chance they can get away, as Jan did in the last race. But and also don't think if you're ahead that you made it. I mean, I thought I was comfortably home, and the guy behind had different ideas and pipped me by the width of a spoke on the line. So yeah, I mean, even if you think you're safe, if there are people a little way behind you, just thrash out all the way to the line, because if you do sit up, you can get pipped. We've seen it in the pro races, and it happens on RGT too. So keep your wits about you. So we're getting ever closer to the hallowed Stoke Poaches. So we say hello to the hallowed Stoke Poaches. Left turn here. And to get to the churchyard's a little bit off the beaten track. It requires you to go down a road that a lot of traffic that wouldn't and doesn't. So it's not always obvious where it is. I mean, I often have to remind myself how to get there. Put it that way. It's not a road I would particularly, use a lot as a motorist or a local. But we are getting very, very close now. As I say, the gradients haven't particularly changed, so there's nothing tactically that I can really give you on this. It's, as I say, the two big hurdles, if you like, are the hill out of Chalfont St Giles and the hill out of Fulmer. And that's where the race will be won and lost, apart from the upcoming sprint, which we're about to encounter. So there is a turn coming up. And as soon as we go down that will be the start of the sprint. Let's say getting ever closer. And it's, I guess it's, I mean, you can't really sort of use this as a guidance. You can't sort of say, well, okay, when I pass that house on the left, that's the place to start sprinting. I mean, these videos don't really let you know that, do they? So here's the turn, and this is the sprint, right? So this road is the one that takes us right to Stoke Poaches churchyard, and you should be sprinting now. And if not, sitting on somebody's wheel who is. Getting ever closer. It is just around the bend. Not a long way to go. It's not even as if I think we're going to see the church, because the trees, I don't even we're going to give you a clue right now where the finish is. So you're going to just have to trust me when I slam the brakes on. But we are very, very nearly there. So this is Stoke Poaches churchyard. It's not actually in the heart of the village like a lot of churchyards are, and here we are. As you can see, there's a little picture in the screen showing the tomb, which is, if you stop here, the other side of that road, just behind that house, is the church where the tomb is. Good luck. Bye.